All right, well, good evening, everyone. I think we should get started because we need all the time we have this evening. My name is Stacy Brennan. I'm the Curator of Education for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. Thank you so much for joining us. Lehigh University is a museum. Lehigh University Art Galleries is a museum located on Lehigh University's campus. We are a free museum and offer many different types of programs, including the one that you are joining us for this evening. Just a quick overview, I'm going to give a little background about the museum and then turn it over to Ian, who's going to talk about Café the Lodge and everything that they do, their wonderful work with our community and our featured kind of recipe that we have today. And then we'll kick it over to Maite to cook with us, and we're going to kind of intersperse some discussion about Cuban artists in the Lehigh University Art Gallery collection. Please feel free at any time to enter questions in the chat box, to unmute yourself if you have a question or want to participate in the discussion. We welcome participatory conversation. We are recording, as I mentioned, so just a heads up on that. And we will begin our presentation this evening. So Lehigh University Art Galleries has over 17,000 works of art in our collection from diverse time periods and cultures, everything from ancient Chinese ceramics, African sculpture, as well as French Impressionist paintings to contemporary artists. Our mission statement has been recently rewritten, and we believe that we can advance critical thinking, cultural understanding, and well-being for the campus and community through transformative experiences with art. Similar to the experience that we are having this evening, we do this through lots of different programs, through presentation of exhibitions throughout 7 galleries on 3 campuses, 2 art study centers. We have a reading room on campus and over 50 outdoor sculptures throughout the 3 campuses, as well as an outdoor exhibition on the South Bethlehem Greenway. So as the weather is getting nicer, we do hope that you'll explore these opportunities. And you can also go to our website at www.luag.org to explore a portion of our digital collection. We're in the process of digitizing all 17,000 works of art, but as of now, we have closer to 3,000, which is plenty to explore. So we hope you will take advantage of that, as well as the resources that are located there. This evening, our partner is Café the Lodge, and we have Ian Panico here, who is going to talk to us about the mission of the Lodge and how they became established in Bethlehem, an amazing resource, and we're grateful to have you here this evening, Ian. So I'm going to turn it over to you as Director of the Lodge.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Panico. As Stacy said, I'm the Director of the Lodge. We are a program of resources for human development. We're located in South Bethlehem in Pennsylvania. We are right off the Greenway, so while you're walking around taking a look at the art, you can enter right up through our backyard, enjoy some outdoor seating, as well as some beautiful murals that we have. We are big supporters of local art. We actually have a new mural being opened up on First Friday, so if you're local, feel free to stop by for some music and see our new mural. Café the Lodge came out of an inspiration from Ike Van Munster, our original program director. When Allentown State Hospital closed in 2010, the city and the county was looking for new programs to reinvest dollars in, and Café the Lodge was one that they decided to go forward with. This program started out as something that offers flexible job opportunities for adults with mental illness, and shortly after, thank you, Christine, for the comment about outdoor seating. It started with flexible job opportunities, and shortly after grew into something much bigger than we ever expected it to be. We are now a vocational training program for adults with mental illness. We work with 18 people at a time in our kitchen to teach people the skills that they need to be successful in job opportunities outside of Café the Lodge. And then we work with local employers and the people that we employ to, get them into competitive employment in the community. We've been very successful with our job program. We transition about 16 people, about 12 to 16 people a year. So we tend to provide services for about 36 people a year. It's very public. It's very open. We believe that we need to be really involved in the community, and we believe that, mental illness does have a stigma to it, so that every time somebody comes into Café the Lodge, we have that opportunity to show people that mental illness is not, the horrible things that you hear about. It's much more, and, these are people that we're working with that, have dreams and abilities and desires like the rest of us. So Café the Lodge is a fully functioning cafe that you would have anywhere else in Bethlehem. We're truly blessed by the relationships that we have in the community with people. We strongly feel that we can't be a community-based program without being involved in the community. So we work with the Lehigh University Arts Gallery. We work with other organizations in South Bethlehem, other employers, Southside Arts District, to really be actively engaged in our community so that we can be giving back to the community that's provided so much support to us.
Thank you, Ian. And we're so grateful to the programs and services that you provide, and also the venue that you provide to the community. I know that you have lots of programs for different ages, including open mics in a normal year, and opportunities to kind of get outside. I was fortunate enough to work with Ian and the team at the Lodge to install this large-scale mural, which is on the side of the Lodge, called Calma, which was created by an artist, Pau Quintana Jornet, who was from Chile originally and ended up in Germany. But really, she worked with all of the residents at the Lodge to create this design and idea of calm and well-being and mental health, which is something that we all need. And this surely brightens up the South Side and is a great reminder that we should visit the Lodge more often. So thank you, Ian. I just have a couple of pictures of the space. There's always art by local artists on display, as Ian mentioned, at the Lodge, and then just some pictures of the outdoor area, which we should all take advantage of. So now we are going to travel to Cuba for our presentation this evening. Oops, I'm going too fast. We're so fortunate to have quite an amazing collection of Latin artists in the LUAG collection, thanks to our former director, Ricardo Vieira, who is a Cuban artist, who we will talk about this evening. But Cuba is officially the Republic of Cuba, as it is known. It's comprised of the island of Cuba, as well as the Isla de la Juventud, and several minor archipelagos, which is not an easy thing to say. It's located in the Northern Caribbean, where the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic Ocean meet. I didn't realize it is the second most populous country in the Caribbean after Haiti, with over 11 million inhabitants. It is a beautiful place. We have work here that we're looking at by Louise Cruz, Los Sitios in Havana, Cuba. And this photograph really gives you a sense of the color and beauty of the landscape within Cuba. He was an artist who really used photography to express his inner self. He felt that each photo was a form of his history, his tradition, and his past. So he often photographed kind of everyday scenery in Cuba and people, and really was passionate about bringing out the everyday beauty and expressing that to others, especially the Cuban and Latin culture. The photograph that we have here, I just love, by Mario Algaze, Domino Park from Little Havana. And dominoes is really a common game that is played throughout Cuba. And I just love how this photograph captures the idea of kind of gathering together in spaces and the sense of building community through sharing experiences like playing dominoes. And it really, I think, connects well to our theme this evening with Café the Lodge, of building a sense of community and bringing people together, because the Lodge does just that for the South Bethlehem community. And here we have work by Ricardo Vieira, who was the former director of the Lehigh University Art Galleries. He was director for 44 years. He recently passed away within, we're coming up on a year anniversary, and it's a huge loss because Ricardo was not only an artist, but a curator, a scholar, a musician. He really was the Renaissance man. He was a botanist as well. He went all over the world sharing his expertise as a curator and art critic in art, and just sharing kind of his unique aesthetic and eye. And he was born in Cuba and emigrated to the United States at the age of 14 as part of the Operation Peter Pan, where just as Castro was coming into power, many parents were afraid of what could happen with the Communist Party. So they sent 14,000 children to the United States, which immigrated, many of them immigrated to Miami and then kind of went to other places from there. And Ricardo was one of those. And when coming to the United States, he studied art, he studied lots of different things. And we can see kind of the influence of his experience in his work here, and kind of how that's expressed in immigration, but also this idea of the care that was given to him when he arrived in the United States from the church, and how that is expressed in his work. And also we see that within the collection of works that he has acquired for the University Art Gallery collection. He was really passionate about collecting artists from minorities, or I should say the global majority, and really just celebrating Latin art and culture and history. We have another work here called Six Palms that we can see, just the beauty and color that he borrowed from the landscape within both Cuba, but also growing up in Miami. He also was part of, and fits in well, I think, with our theme this evening, of a project that he did with Professor Norman Girardeau here on Lehigh University's campus called the Eat Art Collaborative. And so they played with the notion of consumerism and food and the idea of art in itself, and did a large-scale installation locally at Northampton Community College. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of that, but I just think it's really wonderful to mention. Here we have Louise Cruz Azaceta, and he really is known as kind of one of the post-revolutionary contemporary Cuban artists. He was passionate about exploring moral and ethical expression within work. And this work here was part of a portfolio of 10 artists who created a portfolio to benefit the Alternative Museum in New York City, and really explored the ideas of social and political relevance, and kind of the challenges of kind of governmental regime, the race and the ideology of what the American dream could look like, especially being also a Cuban who emigrated to the United States at a very young age. So we can see a lot of these themes repeating within all these works. Here we have Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, Above All Things, and she was an artist who also emigrated to the United States. Her paternal great-grandparents were from the Yoruba tribe. She also has Chinese and Hispanic heritage, as well as African heritage. And so she really played with the idea of heritage and ethnicity and identity within her work. Her ancestors were enslaved and worked on the sugar farms and sugarcane factories. And so she really expresses kind of this battle of, historical identity and current identity within her work. And this is a large scale Polaroid triptych. So it's just an amazing work. So I pulled out just so you could see a little bit closer, because it's hard to see on the computer, details of the three parts of the work here. And, feel free to add in the chat your own interpretations of these works as I tell you a little bit more about them. But she is, I think, really relevant to, and I'm sure Maite is going to talk about this in a little bit, the idea of kind of slavery and how that is expressed many generations later within sugarcane, and also the recipes and everything that's come from that and the trade throughout the world, and the influence that has had. So something that we thought was important to focus on today is the idea that Cuban people, it's interesting that they're still kind of under a regime where they're provided a staple for food and supplies called a libretto. And they have to ration these coupons to purchase basic necessities and food supplies, such as rice, sugar, meats, and cooking fuels. And so there has been this new generation of artists and chefs and cuisine and collaborations that have been taking place within Cuba to be creative with rationing and the food supplies that are available. And Maite is going to talk a little bit about that in her presentation. So I am going to kick it over to Maite, who we are so grateful is joining us from California today, as some of you are, and is a historian, a chef, an artist herself, and an educator, and offers lots of different programs that explore cuisine from all over the world. So Maite, take it away.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you all so much. I think, can we get out of the PowerPoint and then zoom back into it in a little bit? Thank you. I want to see everybody. Thank you so much. That was amazing. On so many different levels, that art was amazing. And Ian, thank you for sharing, everything about Café the Lodge. When Stacy first told me about what you do, I was just so taken by it. My father was an immigrant from Mexico. He was a psychiatrist, and he started the first mental health clinic in South Texas. And his whole thing was removing the stigma. He wasn't able to do this in Mexico, so he was given the opportunity to do this in the US. And art was a huge part of this. He started art classes. He himself used to sing, but he found this was just an enormous part of the whole, experience, just of life sort of in general. So this was very close to my heart. So what I'll do, today, just to kind of spring off of what Stacy's amazing art the amazing art that Stacy showed, is that rather than really delving full on into the history of Cuban cuisine, I'll scratch the surface a little bit and, talk about it in the context of the Cuban American experience, the mojito that we're going to be making, and also the Cuban sandwich. Is it Cuban? Is it American? So we'll kind of talk about those things. And then I'm going to kick it back to Cuba and look at some artists that are working today in Cuba. This whole other, generation of artists that are in their 20s and 30s that weren't, born. Some of them weren't even born with this operation, Peter Pan that Stacy just mentioned. That didn't live through Castro regime, through all of these changes. This is just a part of their lives. And what they're doing right now, with COVID. And just in the 1990s, with the fall of the Soviet Union, this was created just major food shortages in Cuba. Cuba cannot make enough food, grow enough food to feed itself. And with COVID, with everything shutting down, it was kind of back to the 1990s, this period that Castro called the special period of time, where really there was literally nothing special about it because people were hungry. But it's really amazing what artists are doing there now, using art and food to build community, literally to feed each other, to feed themselves, but also to educate and to bring people together. So it's really incredible how things, you know, what's happening there. But I'll get to that in a minute. But first I thought we'll make some mojitos. Is anybody cooking tonight? Cooking along? I don't see a lot of cameras on, so I can't really tell, but maybe some of you are. Oh yeah, I see Indida's drinking, so that's good.
You have a couple people that raised their hands here.
Okay, good, perfect. Oh yeah, I see the little hands. Great, so we'll start with the mojito, and I thought that it's an interesting cocktail. It is sort of the cocktail of Cuba. You know, it's the drink that Cuba is really known for, but nobody really knows where it first came from. But this artist, Maria Campos Pons, that stuff that Stacy just mentioned at the end, is doing just these, just exploring identity with her artwork. Her great-grandparents were enslaved Africans who worked in the sugar plantations. Sugar was actually introduced in 1511 by the Spaniards. And sugar, there's nothing sweet about sugar, really, when we think of sugar history. It's very much tied into the transatlantic slave trade. So that was that part of her family. And then the Chinese part of her family were working, they were working in the sugar mills. And then she also has, you know, some Spanish descent. So it's a little bit of mix of everything, which is basically what Cuban history is. It was originally inhabited by the Taino, indigenous tribe of the Tainos, who were eating yuca, which is a big part of Cuban cuisine today, a lot of different fruits, peanuts, and a lot of small animals. No pork that we're making today, but iguana or lizards or, you know, seafood. But it was the island of Cuba was a big part of the sugar plantation, of the transatlantic slave trade with the sugar plantations. And they use a lot of sugar in their coffee, which was introduced in the 1700s and really became an industry after the Haitian Revolution. A lot of French coffee farmers in Haiti moved to Cuba, and the coffee industry really began to flourish. Ironically, Cubans get a very small ration of coffee a month, and most of it is actually mixed with peas, or like a type of garbanzo bean that's actually mixed in the coffee. But coffee is social. Just like Café the Lodge, people sort of come together, this idea of sharing a drink, sharing a coffee, sharing a cocktail. It's the history of sort of cafes, you know, in general, going back to the earliest cafes in the 17th century. It was a place to bring people together, artists, intellectuals, a place for revolutionary thought, a place to share ideas. It's essentially a place to share, you know, bring people together. But let me stop talking and make this cocktail. So I have a glass. I'm going to put a tablespoon of sugar. I just have super fine sugar at the bottom of this glass. And I'm going to put a ton of mint. I have about an ounce of mint here. The recipe says for about 25 mint leaves. These mint leaves are so tiny, so I have about 3 times that. So I'm just going to stick this in here and muddle them together. So sugar has been, you know, part of this big, you know, industry since about 1511, which is when the first sugar was planted there. I'm going to now muddle this. And of course, rum is a byproduct of the sugar process. And first it was aguardiente, which is like a kind of like a moonshine. It actually didn't become, you know, rum, this sort of white, clear rum, until the 1800s with Bacardi, when Bacardi he was a Spanish immigrant, moved to Cuba and started the first his first, you know, factory. This was pretty late, in the late 1800s. But the drink, this particular cocktail, so I'm just muddling the tablespoon of sugar with a bunch of mint, and I'm gonna add 1.5, actually, I'm not going to do this yet. I'm going to add my lime juice. So I have the mint, I have the sugar, and then I'm going to add 2 ounces of fresh lime juice. So the history of this particular drink is a little bit murky. Some say it actually dates to the late 16th century with Sir Francis Drake. Queen Elizabeth I sent Sir Francis Drake to Cuba to basically steal all of their gold that belonged to the Spaniards. So legend has it, this was actually something that was first made on his ship. They had some type of moonshine from Europe, or from their, not from Europe, from their colonies, and mint, and a little bit of sugar to kind of make it more palatable. And this was medicine to treat scurvy, to feed to their soldiers. So by the time they arrived in Cuba, they didn't actually take anything, but they had this drink. Maybe it was on the ship. Some people say that they were making this on the island, but mojito was called el drake, which basically the drake. It was called el drake for until the 1940s, when it was first called mojito. In Cuba, in a cafe called the La Bodeguita del Medio, which is this famous touristy restaurant / coffee shop. And other theories say that during Prohibition, a lot of Americans were going to Cuba, bringing their mint julep. So there are quite a number of different theories as to where this particular cocktail emerged. But it is the drink of Cuba. So I have rum, sugar, mint, and I'm going to add about 4 ounces of sparkling water. And actually, first I'm going to add some ice. Whoops. And then I'll top this up with some sparkling water, about 4 ounces of sparkling water. This was something that was added later in the Bodeguita del Medio. Give it another little mix, and then garnish it with some fresh mint. And there you have mojito. Cheers, everybody. Oh, that's so good. But it's really amazing just how many layers of history one drink, the sugar, the rum, can actually hold. It's so many different, layers of history and so many different theories. Like nobody really knows, for sure. Provecho, William. Yes, nobody really knows, for sure. But it's become sort of the quintessential Cuban, cocktail, which is this sort of beautiful, beautiful drink. But also the Cuban sandwich. And I was just so taken when Ian shared that, the most popular sandwich at Café the Lodge is the Cuban sandwich. It's a family recipe from an early employee. And it's just such a wonderful sandwich. I first tasted it many years ago when I was living in New York, and I was like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? This is like this delicious, sandwich. That also has, murky beginnings. Like, where did this sandwich come from? I just mentioned that the indigenous people, the Taínos, were eating, iguana and sort of smaller animals. Pork was introduced, pigs and cattle were introduced, during the conquest. And just to add, Cuba is the first of the American islands that were colonized. So in 1492, that date that we learned, in 5th grade was Christopher Columbus. So it was the first of the islands of the Americas to be colonized. And then it was the last one to be independent. So it was under Spanish rule for a good 400, years or more. No, so it really became a colony in the 1500s. But they introduced all of these different foods and their sort of mono agriculture that essentially destroyed the island, itself. So in the 1950s, 1959, and then into the 60s, with Castro's regime, a lot of Cubans were actually moving to Florida, to Miami. But even before then, and between the 1800s and early 1900s, there was a lot of back and forth. So people working in cigar factories and sugar. So there was a lot of back and forth. And nobody really knows if the Cuban sandwich was Cuban or if it's a Miami thing. Tampa and Miami claim it as theirs. My mom and my brother were in Cuba a few years ago, and I asked them, they're like, we never had a Cuban sandwich in Cuba. But it could have been a sandwich that was served outside of the factories during lunch break. So it's just basically like a flat sandwich. And maybe somebody, some Cubans were in Tampa and said, I want this particular type of sandwich. And so they started calling it the Cuban sandwich because the Cuban wanted this particular type of sandwich. So it has pork. Sometimes it's pork loin. This recipe from Café the Lodge has pulled pork, which is marinated in something called it's this the mojo, this marinade that's citrus and garlic and oregano and cumin. And this is a type of marinade that's pretty much used, as a marinator also on yuca, which is one of these native tubers. It's almost like a potato. So it's a slow cooked pork. And then with the Swiss cheese, and in Tampa, there are parts of Tampa that actually make it with salami. So you see the Swiss cheese, the salami. So you have this kind of the wave of Swiss immigration in the US, Italian, and then the pickle and the mustard has this kind of German influence. So it's all of these different influences in one particular sandwich. And Evelia, I just saw that the marinade smells delicious. The marinade is delicious. It's really, really, it's just incredible. So the sandwich then kind of became this really popular, sandwich. But the thing that distinguishes it from basically that really makes it a Cuban sandwich is the bread. The recipe that was sent out, it says you could use, a hoagie roll or a Portuguese roll or a Mexican bolillo or sort of different types of bread. But the original Cuban sandwich bread, the Cuban bread, is kind of a yeast bread that's very soft, so not super doughy, not super crunchy, so a French baguette wouldn't work. It needs to be soft, that has lard in it. So this is kind of the original Cuban bread. And in Tampa in 1896, there was a Sicilian-born Cuban/Spanish immigrant that decided to open up this first bakery in Tampa to make Cuban bread. And this was just, everybody would go nuts over this bread, and he delivered it every morning. So he had this bakery, he delivered it every morning, like a milkman would deliver goods. And people outside of their door in this particular neighborhood that had a big Cuban population, this is 1896, this is well before Castro, when there was a lot of back and forth. They would put a nail on their front door. There was a nail on their front door. So he would go to the houses and just get his bread and just impale it onto the nail on the door to keep animals from getting to this particular bread. So this was the bread that was used for the Cuban sandwich. Cut to the 1950s and 60s, Miami was nothing. Like, it was just a little town. All of a sudden, we start seeing these waves of Cubans fleeing. Initially, there were chartered flights from the US. So the first wave of very affluent Cubans came over, and then there were the other, waves of people in rafts or people trying to swim over, and there was just this sort of wave of immigration. But Cubans have always been highly, highly, highly educated. So very cosmopolitan. I mean, just what I said before, the African population, the Chinese population, also a pretty large Jewish population in Havana that were part of the original colonizers. There were the Converso Jews. And everything in between, Italians, just pretty much everything. So suddenly Miami, almost overnight, becomes this cosmopolitan city. And of course, they're bringing their food, rice and beans native to the island. Rice is not. Rice is, Asian. But bringing their different foods, bringing their different marinades, pork that's originally, that was brought with the conquest, but the type of cooking the pork was also brought over. So we start seeing coffee shops, we start seeing the music, we start seeing cultural centers. So everything starts springing up. And of course, Miami wants to claim the Cuban sandwich as their own right then and there. But there are Cubans, there are about something like 2 million Cubans in the US, roughly, all over, but mainly concentrated in Florida and in New Jersey. But so compared to, say, something like 35 million Mexicans, that's a big difference between 2 million and 35 million. But Cuban food is actually second in popularity to Mexican food when we think of, Hispanic, Latin American food. And it's the rice and the beans and this amazing pork, and of course the Cuban sandwich and the mojitos and the coffee, the very, very sweet coffee that they make, that they serve. I just realized the time, but I want to show some images of the art just to go back. So does anybody have any questions? I know, sorry, and I just saw the sandwich of Porto's. Yes, Porto's is a Cuban cafe in Los Angeles. It's a chain. And yes, they do have it. And there's a place in Los Angeles called El Cochinito, which means the little pig. In Silver Lake, they have a really great Cuban sandwich as well. But I want to just kind of kick it back a little bit to Cuba. So what I mentioned, what Cuban artists are actually doing today. And this is, these are two artists, Samuel Riera and Dervis Campos. Dervis Campos is also a biochemist. And they have been working together because when COVID started, when Cuba kind of was shut off from the world. I mean, for us going to the grocery stores and seeing these empty aisles was quite shocking. Unfortunately, this is what Cuba, is like usually, but it just became that much worse. They had been working together since 2019 in creating these sculptures, these wooden sculptures, growing different types of plants in an effort to educate people, to especially young people, like school-age children, to grow their own food. When the pandemic hit in the US, everybody started making sourdough and everybody, and people were planting in the backyard. This is actually revolutionary thinking in Cuba. So these two artists started this in 2019 as part of a project with a group of artists from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it was called Picturing Climate. They had exhibits in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Jordan, and it culminated with a public program at the Tate Modern in London, essentially based to do this. It took a turn when COVID hit. And so they're using these plants, and they say that some of these new plants started sprouting actually at the beginning of COVID, which was so so serendipitous, and just this whole idea of, centuries ago, prior to the conquest, Cuba was a forest, and they now only 14% of the original land is intact. Everything has been, deforested. So they really want to bring this back and to really, educate people to do this. So these are just two artists. There's a whole series of artists that are doing this. There was a great article. And Stacey, could you click it to the next slide, please? Thank you. This was an article that came out I think last month. That's all about what Cuban artists are actually doing during the lockdown. And artists, as in filmmakers, photographers, musicians, the biochemist, who's also an artist that we just looked at. And this is a girl in her 20s, a young woman in her 20s, Sara Sofia Gutierrez. At the beginning, she was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to have so much time to rehearse. And then she's like, wait, but then there's still so much more time. Like, what do I do? So she started baking. And the internet is a little bit more open in Cuba right now. So these young artists and musicians started kind of announcing what they were doing on Instagram, on their social media, and created a whole other world for themselves. Let's look at the next slide. These girls are my favorite. They're called las frescas, which means the fresh ones, as in, you know, fresh food, but also like fresh, you know, cool. They're three friends that went to film school together. This one here, sorry, I wanna say their names, but I don't remember them offhand. Leisa, the one in the white dress, Leisa Medina, she's an actress. Evelyn Batista is a graphic designer, and Violena Ampudia is a documentary filmmaker. They're in their 20s, I think they're 22, and they were like, what are we gonna do? You know, there's nothing, like, what are we gonna do with COVID? And so the regular supermarkets were pretty, I mean, there's the bare minimum, but they have these street markets called agromercados that have a little bit more food available. There's a great YouTube video of them being interviewed. If you speak Spanish, it's fantastic, and they talk about their entire process. When life stopped with COVID, their whole thing was, how do we keep life moving forward? How do we continue creating when we're shut down? And I think this is something that we can all relate to, and how we've had to shift and be creative this past year. But they actually started making jams, going to the agromercados on a Monday, seeing what was available and creating menus for the week. So they were making jams with what was available, or you know, different you know, foods. But they also, what they were doing, that this is revolutionary, is making healthy food. The whole concept of healthy cooking is not something that's very Cuban. So this is what they introduced, this whole concept of healthy cooking. They started making pesto based on the herbs that were available. They started making hummus and lentil burgers. And everybody was just blown away by this. And announcing it, Evelyn, the one in the middle, came up with this logo of the three of them naked, which was very kind of shocking and fun, and just attracted attention. And they started gaining a following and getting orders on Instagram, and people asking them, oh, my son has, you know, some ailment, and they're like, well, why don't you try feeding them this? And on their Instagram, they teach people, you know, what can you do with extra squash seeds, and they use everything. If they use a lemon to make, you know, a pesto or whatever it is, then they'll dry the lemon, the peel, and then another one will actually make incense out of that, and then they'll go to their friend who's an architect and plant the seed. So they use everything, and it's grown more into a co-op. So they'll have, you know, their friend who's a, you know, a painter will make, you know, coconut oil, or some other friend who's, you know, another, you know, photographer or whatever they are, will make some sort of alcoholic, you know, beverage. So they've met more people than ever through this particular process. And Evelyn specifically says that doing this, using this sort of creativity, making art in this particular way, 100% saved her mental health during COVID. So it's using sort of food and art to bring people together. And you should definitely follow them on Instagram, because it's just very cool to see, you know, what they're doing. And this was just a bunch of, you know, just three girlfriends that got together and said, okay, what are we gonna do to keep moving forward? And also, it's mostly vegetarian, because that's how they prefer to eat. But they also say, well, we're not vegetarian. We just like to eat, you know, healthy. So they never want to beat anybody over the head with saying, you know, what you should eat. But they're taking this opportunity. And when COVID ends and life goes back to normal, it's something that they say that they want to maybe, you know, keep going in some way, because it has really opened up the world, and they've created something revolutionary that has never existed in Cuba. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we make our sandwich? Oh, I see there's some in the chat. Oh, sorry, Kim, are there different varieties? Pretty much, they're all pretty much the same. It has pork. Ian's, the recipe from Café the Lodge has pulled pork. It's often roast pork. But it's always that. It's always pork, ham, Swiss cheese, mustard. That's it. I know the Café de Lodge also uses a garlic aioli, which is not something that you usually see in, say, Tampa or Miami or anywhere in Florida. It's usually just yellow mustard and dill pickles. They say that the real Cuban sandwich only has 3 slices of dill pickles. So go figure. And then there's some in Tampa that also use salami, but pork, ham, and Swiss cheese, pickles, and mustard, yellow mustard. That's basically what it is, just yellow mustard. What could you substitute for pork? Oi, that's a tough one. What could you substitute? I'm gonna send that over to Ian. What would you do if you have, what would you substitute? Oh, you already answered that. Jackfruit. Okay, perfect. Oh yeah, you're right. Jackfruit is a great substitute for pork.
I suggested jackfruit as a vegetarian, but Ian probably has better substitutes.
Yeah, I saw Stacey say jackfruit, and I would say, I would go with a dark meat chicken if I was going to do it, because, if you're going to go pulled, you want that fat content that's in there that really brings a lot of that flavor profile around. If you want to reduce the fat content a little bit, always make sure you strain it after you cook it, and then mix the marinade in. Additionally, you could do a mixture of, white meat and dark meat, kind of lower that as well.
So good. Oh, bacon would be a good twist. That's delicious. Bacon is always a good idea. Bacon is always a good twist, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and just start making the sandwich. I'm going to move this out of the way so that you can see what I'm doing here. So I have a griddle here, just a flat top. You could just put it on the regular, skillet. So I'm just going to heat it up. I know we're running a little bit low in time, but I'm going to put it on medium. I'm going to put it on medium heat just because it gets so hot. And I have all my goodies here. So I'm using this bread, torta bread. So it's a pretty flat bread, soft bread. So I'm just going to slice it in half. And what did I do with my knife? Sorry. Oh, here it is. So I'm just going to slice it. And what was I going to say? So the marinade of the pork, so I marinated for, the recipe says about 6 to 8 hours. I actually marinated it about 12 hours. I marinated overnight 2 nights ago, and then cooked it for like 6 hours. And it literally just breaks apart. It's so incredibly flavorful. And I think, Ian, the part of the recipe where you reduce the half of the marinade and then pour it into the pork, just really, really just makes it amazing. So good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to butter both sides of the bread, and then I'm going to butter the skillet also once I'm ready to smash it. But smash it, I mean, if you have a panini press at home, great, definitely use that. I actually don't have a panini press. So what I'm going to do is I have a very flat lid. This is sort of me being ingenious. Make sure that it's a flat lid and not some that curve in a little bit. And this is what I'm going to use to smash it, because you want to get it really nice and crispy and sort of brown on both sides. So I'm buttering the bread really well. And then I'm going to add my yellow mustard. And you want to do yellow mustard, not like Dijon mustard or anything like that, just regular yellow mustard. Does anybody have any comments or questions while I mustard the bread?
I was going to say, for a weight, you can always use either a brick or a flat stone wrapped in tin foil.
Oh, I like that idea. That's interesting. Right, that makes perfect sense. So I have bread, and now I'm going to layer it with the pulled pork. So you know what? I'm gonna shift this camera over so that you can see what I'm doing.
Did you strain any excess liquid from the pork before you're going to put it in the sandwich, or do you want to keep some of that marinade or that liquid in it?
You know, I reduced it, and this might be a question for Ian, just because that's how you all do them, but I actually reduced it quite a bit, and it just absorbed it all. So I didn't end up straining it or anything like that. I just reduced it enough to where it wasn't liquidy, that everything got really absorbed. But Ian, how do you all do it in your?
I would say if you're, with a restaurant, it's always tricky because you need to store things to make sure that it's as fresh as possible. So when storing, if you're going to store it for longer, I would keep it in the liquid, as much as possible, because that'll keep it moist for a long amount of time. But it's kind of like half and half. You want that liquid in there, but you don't want it to be so much that's going to make your bread soggy. So if you pull it out with a slotted spoon or something like that, and just give it a little press on the side of your dish, especially if it's real hot still, and real fresh, that should be just enough to drain it.
Let me flip my camera over, and you can let me know if that's enough. That's enough meat, or if I need to add a little bit more. Enough pork, or do we need a little more?
I would definitely add more.
You would definitely add more. Okay.
Yeah.
I would too.
Stacy's had our sandwiches before. We definitely load them up.
More. Okay. Well, I can.
And you got to remember, we're a training facility too, so we tend to be a little heavy-handed.
Okay. Perfect. Is that good, or a little more?
I think you're fine.
You're fine. Okay. So.
And I saw a video on Café the Lodge, and they mentioned that they have like a secret aioli the sauce instead of the mustard. So I just did, of course I don't know what their secret is, but I just did an aioli for mine instead of the yellow mustard. So we'll see. It tastes yummy.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
That's
so do you
did that?
I love that. So am I doing I'm doing the one slice or two slices of?
I would do two slices of ham. Yeah.
2 slices. Okay.
This is always a tricky sandwich too, because if your meats and everything are cold, there's a real you have to cook it for a longer amount of time to get everything melted. Something that I've certainly done before is heated up the ham and the pork at the same time, like hit it on the grill real quick, which helps it melt.
Okay. Hopefully this won't take too long. Just 1 piece of cheese. Is that good? 2 pieces of cheese.
If you keep asking me to add more food, I'm never going to stop you. That'll be a Dagwood by the time we're done here.
That's true. Okay, my pickles are so tiny that I'm going to do more than 3 pickles. So I'm going to do a little bit more than that. And that's it. I'm going to just put the other bread, and I'm going to put some, and I'm like, oh, I'll add some jalapeno to it. Then it becomes something completely different. Okay, I'm gonna butter my skillet.
And Ian, can you talk about what you serve it with at the lodge? Because I know you guys have an amazing macaroni salad. I don't know if that's what
we do rotating daily sides. So we'll do macaroni salad, pasta salad, potato salad. If we're doing some catering and we've got, some Spanish ingredients, we'll throw together, like some, black bean and corn salads, or, we'll just throw together a side. So when we serve it, you get a side and then, a big handful of chips with it as well, some kettle cooked chips.
That sounds delicious. I think I've seen it. I know here, I wish I need to go to Bethlehem to taste your sandwich. The one that's here in Los Angeles that I mentioned, the Cochinito place, they serve it with either fried plantains, which is big in Cuba, or a side of black beans, which is, but
the first thing I thought is if I was going to a Cuban place, I'd expect plantains. That was the first thing I was thinking of, yeah.
Or like the tostones, which are the double fried, the flat, and then the double fried. Those are so good. So I'm just flattening them. I want to get a little bit of color before I flip it over. Let's see, is anybody making it now, or did everybody already make it? Let's see.
I saw a hand from Christine. She's
Yeah.
cooking with you.
I see her in the kitchen, yeah. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over. Let me just take a look at it.
One of the things we talked about earlier is when you cook the pork, because you make so much, it's nice. You can freeze some, and then it's great for multiple meals and multiple days.
Yeah, definitely. It's so good too. It's a really great, really great recipe. I love pork. It's my favorite meat. Okay, I'm gonna put a little bit more butter, and then I'm just gonna flip it over. So you can see how this would be, you know, a street sandwich. It's like those street, you know, the street, this is what they do in the street food. They have these kind of flat tops. I'm just gonna flip it.
And if you see a street cart doing this, they probably got a bucket of melted butter that they'll just slather over it. So I would not recommend keeping a bucket of melted butter in your house, because it's gonna go.
Probably not a good,
Yeah.
probably not a good idea.
Cholesterol will go through the roof.
So is this is the most popular sandwich at Café the Lodge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, love it. Oh, Christine, preference for oven or crock pot? I actually made it in the crock pot. I'm a huge fan of my crock pot, but yeah, and I assume you make big batches in the oven, right? You roast a bunch of it in the oven, yeah.
And I would say it's really your preference. I mean, if you really want to, you know, spend a lot of time on it, you know, go for the oven. I mean, you'll get, you know, a nice little bit of crisp to it. That's really important. You know, if you throw it in a crock pot, I mean, that's good too. And if you've got a broiler on your oven, you can always finish it off in the broiler too and get some of that crisp back into it. Either way, your house is going to smell phenomenal when you're making this, so you can't really go wrong.
I'm curious how you both feel about the Instapot, because it's, do you feel like you can get the same flavor from the Instapot as the crock pot or the oven?
I don't own one.
I have one and I've used it once. It was a gift. I've used it once. Yeah, I don't think I did it right. It scares me. The little vent thing, it just scares me, and then it makes a sound. It's like, you got it. Yeah. Yeah, so no, I don't use it. But people swear by it. Okay, so let me just flip this over so you can see. Look at that. Whoop. Nice and golden. And I'm just gonna, you see a little bit of melted cheese. I'm gonna cut it out of the diagonal.
Yeah, crunch is my favorite part.
Oh, I know, look at that.
Beautiful.
Yay. Very excited. Very excited. I feel like I can't wait to take a bite of this. Is anybody gonna take a bite along with me? Or am I gonna be the only one? Christine, I think you're eating, no?
I'm eating a salad from Wendy's. I'm making the marinade tonight and I'm making the sandwich tomorrow.
Okay. So yeah, so maybe if you have time, just put it in the oven like Ian suggested. Yeah.
And for anyone who is cooking either anytime that you make this recipe, please take a picture and share it with us. We have gift certificates to the Lodge that we'd love to gift to those of you who share your pictures with us. So please do so and tag us on Instagram, or you can email us. You have my email from the Zoom link.
This is delicious. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm gonna eat well, and I'm so happy to have learned about these amazing artists tonight, and about hearing more about Café the Lodge.
Me too. Thank you for sharing with us, Maite, the history of Cuba, of the recipe, of kind of the influence that has brought us to where we are today. And we have 2 upcoming programs. We're still working on the details for April 29th, but we will, of course, notify all of you We will share the links from the different articles that we discussed this evening. And all of the works that I mentioned are available through our website at luag.org. So if you're interested in seeing those works in more detail, you're welcome to visit our website to see that. And then on May 15th, it says Taste of Art for Kids, but it's not only for kids. So we hope you'll join us. That is, actually, I'm sorry, the time is wrong. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So Saturday, May 15th, if you're interested in a Saturday program, we have that as well. And these are just two of many programs that we have coming up at the art gallery. So please visit us at our website and join us for upcoming discussions. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining us this evening, and for Café the Lodge for everything that you do in our community. We're grateful. And I know I had breakfast there this morning and plan to return for the Cuban sandwich for lunch this week. And Maite, thank you so much for walking us through the cooking demonstration and history this evening.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone joining us. Please tag us in your pictures. We would love to see what you have made.
Thank you for having me, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Maite.